Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ahlan wa sahlan. Welcome to this video, guys. My name is Liaquat and we are going through Mukhtasar al-Qudoori. If you guys are not familiar with my YouTube channel, check out the videos, hit the like button, subscribe and share the videos with all your contacts so that everyone can benefit, inshallah. So we're continuing this chapter of Ayb. So this is Khiyar Ayb. Last week, if you remember, we stopped up to here, and now today we are going to continue with this. So من اشترى عبدا فأعتقه أو مات عنده. Right, so this is اشترى. It means to buy. اشترى, to buy. عبدا, slave. أعتق is to free a slave. أعتق يؤتق إعتاق. مات يموت, it means to die. عنده ثم اطلع, to become aware. Right, so this word came before as well. اطلع على عيب نقصانه. نقصان means deficiency. In this case it's partial refund. فإن قتل المشتري العبد. Right, so if the mushtari kills the slave. طعاما is food. عيب يرجع بشيء, anything. باع فباعه, all these words we've kind of done them, so I don't think there's a need to go over them again. رد يرد, it means to return, right, to give back. الأول is the first. اشترى عبدا وشرط البيع براءة. فإن كان عيبا ليس له أن يرده. Alright, جملة means all. Okay, so let's do a little bit of the tarkeeb then. Let's tarkeeb it. So remember last week we actually got, something here. Last week we actually got up to here. So let's do the tarkeeb of this. So man ishtara abdan. So abdan, this is going to be the maf'ul bihi. Fail, file. Okay, so usual. أعتقه أو مات يموت. عنده is going to be ظرف مفعول فيه. ثم اطلع على عيب جار مجرور. راجع بنقصانه فإن قتل فعل. المشتري. Now, why does this have a sukun? Why doesn't it have a dhamma? Put it in the comments if you know. العبد is the مفعول به. أو كان طعاما. كان is the khabar of كان, and the ism is inside of كان. فأكله ثم اطلع على عيبه لم يرجع عليه بشيء مجرور في قول أبي حنيفة رحمه الله وقال يرجع بنقصان مضاف العيب. ومن باع عبدا, again مفعول به, فباعه المشتري ثم رد عليه بعيب فإن قبله بقضاء القاضي فله أن يرده على بائعه الأول. وإن قبله بغير قضاء القاضي فليس له أن يرده على بائعه الأول. ومن اشترى عبدا وشرط البائع البراءة مفعول به again من كل عيب مضاف إليه فليس له أن يرده بعيب جار مجرور. وإن لم يسمه جملة العيوب ولم يعدها. Alright, so what is this basically discussing? So let's continue with the discussion now about the masail of Khiyar Ayb. So remember, we talked last time about if you have a fault in an item, then you actually have the right to give it back, because this was something that you were expected to have when you purchased it. So when you purchased it, you expected, anticipated the item to be flawless, faultless. You found a fault in there, and therefore that means you're not really happy with what you have, what you found. So he says, "Man ishtara abdan fa'ataqahu." Whoever buys a slave. So let's say, for example, this is Monday, Tuesday. I like using days of the week because it's kind of very easy to follow then. So let's say man ishtara abdan. So a guy, he buys a slave on Monday. Ishtara abdan. And then on Wednesday, let's say, so this is the day that he buys. Okay, deal is done, ijab and qabul is done there. Then on Wednesday, he actually frees the slave. Yeah, so he gets free, so slave is happy. Okay, it's a bit strange there. He's happy, so slave is happy. What is going to happen if he was to discover later on let's say for example, he found out over here that the slave had a fault in there. He found out, let's say 1 day later, the slave had a fault, but he's freed the slave now. What happens in this case? Yeah, does he get the right? Does he get to get a full refund, partial refund? What happens? So the rule basically is that he gets a partial refund, right? So he's going to get partial refund. Now, why doesn't he get a full refund? Well, because he's freed the slave, you got nothing to give back. So it's unfair to the seller that if he was to return the slave back to the guy, then obviously you can't, because he's no longer a slave. Right? So the freeing of the slave is the problem here. You can't go back on that. You can't reverse it. So therefore, the partial refund. The same goes for if a person was to buy a slave, and let's say the slave was to die. So the slave died, for example, on Wednesday, and he found a fault on Thursday. What happens? Again, he gets a partial refund. He can't get full refund because he can't give a dead body back. That's not going to be the same. Okay, so unfortunately, you can't give it back. So it's like, for instance, you found a fault in there and the buyer will give you back a partial refund. Partial refund is basically going to be about the difference between its value without the fault and the difference with the fault. So let's say you bought it for, I don't know, £1,000, and then the fault was equal to, let's say, £200. You're going to get £200 discount. Yeah, £200 given back to you. Does that make sense? So it's quite straightforward. It says, Man ishtara abdan, whoever buys a slave, fa'ataqahu, and then frees the slave, or mata, or the slave dies with him, like we said, dies on Wednesday. ثم اطلع على عيب, and then on Thursday he finds the fault. رجع بنقصانه, he is allowed to get partial refund, right? Because he did not get the item technically according to how he wanted it. All right, so that's the first masla. All right, next masla now. So let's say, for instance, same again over here, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Okay, so this time what happens is the guy buys the slave. Okay, my slaves today look like they're dancing. So he buys the slave, and what happens is he kills him, unfortunately, sadly. Right, so on Wednesday, okay, slave is dead. R.I.P. Yeah, he's dead. Wednesday now he's dead. So what happens? He's dead on Wednesday. On Thursday he finds the fault. Oh, there was a fault in there. So now this is a bit different, because the other one was like a good thing he did. He freed the slave, but the slave died himself, which obviously is out of his control. So in this case, if a person was to find a slave, buy a slave, and then kill the slave, then Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he says, right, so A-H, he says, no, nothing. Right? You get nothing back at all. You lost everything. And that's because you killed the slave. You kind of like did something really bad, and if you didn't know that fault was there, it made no difference to you. It made no difference at all to you. And because you killed it, right, you kind of like, you've done something really heinous and bad. But the Sahibain, they say no. They say every individual deserves to get, Abu Yusuf and Muhammad, they say he gets, yes, he gets a partial refund. Yeah, they say he gets a partial refund because even though he done something wrong, okay, that's fine. But the partial refund is there because he had the right to buy the item in a sound condition and he didn't get that. So whether he killed him or not, that's a separate crime, but he still gets a partial refund. Now the same applies to, let's say, his food, right? So let's say it was food. Okay, if it's food, let's say a nice juicy cake. He's bought this nice cake, and then on Wednesday he eats the cake, and then he finds a fault in the cake, that the cake was faulty from before, right? What happens in this case? So in this case, the same thing. Imam Abu Hanifa would say no refund, and Sahibain would say yes refund. Okay, the concept basically works in the same manner. So in qatala al-mushtari, if the mushtari kills a slave, or kana ta'aman, or it was food and he ate it. So Abu Hanifa says basically he's eaten the food. He's got the benefit out of the food which he kind of bought it for, right? So he's kind of benefited from it. ثم اطلع على عيب, and then he discovers an عيب على عيبه لم يرجع عليه بشيء, right? So fault, he's not allowed to get any refund. في قول أبي حنيفة رحمه الله وقال صاحبين say يرجع بنقصان العيب. Yeah, he's going to get at least partial refund. He can't get a full refund, we know that, but partial refund he can get, why not? Alright, so that's the first masala for this one. Right, let's move on to this side. Straightforward masala, straightforward, right, easy one. Right, next masala over here. Let's draw a line over here so I don't confuse this. Okay, so let's say there's a guy. Okay, we're going to call him seller number 1. Okay, he sells a laptop to this guy. I'm going to call him buyer number 1. All right, buyer number 1. So he sells, he gives him the cash. Okay, deal's done. Then what happens is this guy goes and sells that laptop on to another person. So let's say he sells it on to buyer number 2. Okay, buyer 2. And then he goes and sells it on to buyer 3. Okay, so forth. Is this allowed? Of course it's allowed. You can sell whatever you like. Right, no problem, no problem. The problem over here arises, let's say he sold on Monday, this sale took place, and this one took place on Wednesday. Okay, and this one took place on Friday. And this one took place on Sunday. Okay, so if let's say, for example, this guy has sold this, and he sold it to B, and then he sold it to B3, right? Now this guy, B3, finds out there was a fault in there from before Monday. Before Monday, there was a fault in there. And he's just discovered in the laptop. So this guy can actually give it back to this guy. No, actually I shouldn't do that. I should do this. He can give it back to this guy. But there's going to be 2 ways he can give it back. He can either give it back through the courts, goes courts, gets a court case done, or he can get it done out of court. Yeah, so let's call this out of court. Either in court or out of court. If he gets it done in court, yeah, if he gets it done in court, then he can return it back to him. And the same thing happens here. He can either get it done out of court or in court or out of court. If he gets it done through court, he can give it back to this guy. The point is, when you get it done through the court system, what happens is the court system nullifies the previous contract as though it didn't happen. So therefore, this transaction is connected to the previous one. But if you don't get it done through courts, right? So if you do not get it done through the courts, if you get it done outside of the courts, and he gave it back, right? So let's say he gives it back over here, then you're not allowed to give it back over there. Not allowed, right? So you are not allowed to give it back over there if it was done outside a court. Does that make sense? And the reason simply is because when you give something back to someone, it's like another transaction took place. So it's basically like this then. It's like this guy became the seller and this guy became buyer number 4. And if he gives it back to him, it's become buyer number 5. Meaning this will not be recognized as a nullification of the contract. This is not nullification. This is considered to be new contract, new deal. And if it's a new deal, then it's like it blocks the previous. You can't give it back then, right? So you have to go backwards. And the only way you can go backwards through the courts. The courts are the only ones, according to Hanafis, that have the power to be able to void a contract. You can void a contract, but it won't be recognized as an official voiding, right? So understand that. It's not recognized. Like, for example, if I sell you a laptop and you buy it, and then you give me that laptop back, you want your money back. Technically, that's not a nullification of the contract. That's actually like a new contract. Someone else sees that. To them, it's like 2 contracts took place. One was I sold it to you, and the other one you sold it back to me. That's how it's seen. Between us, it's a nullification. But when courts get involved, it's not only between us nullification, it's for everyone it's nullification. Does that make sense? That's how the power of courts this is. And a lot of times, if you don't understand this masala, how the courts work, especially in buyu and muamalat, it's very hard to get your head around a lot of these masail. Right? So it's very important, understand how court systems work, how the courts are there to maintain harmony in society so people don't cheat each other. Right? That's the whole point of the court system. Just like in the West, for example, the court system is there to maintain harmony so people cannot be, victimized, right? Or taken advantage of. So understand this. So let me just explain this again. So if he sells it to him, and then he sells it to him, and then he sells it to him, if it goes through courts, that's fine. He gives it back to him. He gives it back to him. If he goes through courts as well, and you can give it back to him. So as long as you've gone through court system, it's like the contract has officially, inwardly, outwardly been nullified. Then it can be given back to the previous guy. And if it hasn't, if it's outside a court, then no. Right? So then, in that case, if it's outside a court, then you cannot give it back, basically. Alright, so let's have a look at what this says. So he says, Man ba'a, whoever sells abdan, so this guy over here, فَبَاعَهُ الْمُشْتَرِي, so this guy over here, the first buyer, he sells it off to someone else. ثُمَّ رُدَّ, so then I've done two buyers, okay, so it's fine. Then it was returned to him, so like I told you in this, it could have been in this case, but I extended it to 3. Then it was returned to the buyer number 2, let's say. فَإِنْ قَبِلَهُ بِقَضَاءِ الْقَاضِي, if buyer number 2 accepts it through the courts, through the judges, فَلَهُ أَنْ يَرُدَّهُ, then he has the right, buyer 2 has the right to return it back, ala ba'i al-awwal, the first guy. وَإِنْ قَبِلَهُ, but if he was to accept it بِغَيْرِ قَضَاءِ الْقَاضِي, without going through the courts, out of court settlement, فَلَيْسَ لَهُ أَنْ يَرُدَّهُ, then he does not have the right to return it to the first seller. Right? Because this is not considered to be a full nullification. Right? It's a partial nullification. Okay, I think that masala is quite straightforward. Let me know what you guys think of that masala. Was it the first time you've ever heard of this masala? Does it make sense to you now? Is it something that made you happy and think, wow, I finally understood this masala? Well, to me, alhamdulillah, I love these masal. Right, next. Now, there is something which is known as a person who claims, so let's say there's a guy, he sells a laptop to another guy, and he's got the cash, right? Sells it to him, gives cash to him. Now, if this guy says that, look, he says that I declare that I am selling this to you with all of its faults. You're buying it with all the faults. Yeah? Or I am free of any type of fault in this. Okay? All right, so let's say he says this. He's almost, you can say, he's absolving himself of all the faults. So whether he mentions each one, whether he says, look, this has got 1, 2, 3 faults in there, or whether he just says all the faults that come with it, then this guy, the buyer, does not have the right to give it back if he finds a fault. It's like saying, bought as seen. This is how the laptop is. I'm selling it as it is. There's no refund. You see it, check it out. If you're happy with it, take it. There's no refund. Are you allowed to do that? Yes, you can. Yeah, that is something which is considered to be permissible. So, according to the Hanafis, the seller is permitted to sell an item in this fashion, and the buyer must accept it in this way if he wants to buy it. If he doesn't want to buy it, then he can obviously reject the contract. So he says, Man, whoever, ishtara, purchases a slave, wa sharata al-bayi'u al-bara'ata, and always a slave is mentioned. I just mentioned laptop because it's something more relevant. Sharat al-bayi'u al-bara'ata, and the buyer, the seller, he has conditioned absolution, right? So he said, I'm absolved of all the faults. Min kulli aybin, I'm absolved of all the faults in this item. فَلَيْسَ لَهُ, then the buyer does not have the right, and yaruddahu, to give it back to him, bi'aybin. وَإِن لَمْ يُسَمِّ, even if the seller does not mention جُمْلَةَ الْعُيُوبِ وَلَمْ يَعُدَّهَا, and doesn't count them. So if he does count them, that's also fine. If he doesn't count them, that's also fine as well. Right? In both situations, you want to sell your car, and you want to say, right, my car has these faults in there, and if you want to buy it, you buy it. or you just say, look, the car's got faults. It's up to you. Check it out. If you're happy with it, buy it. Otherwise, I'm not going to give you a refund, right? Sold as seen, right? So you buy it as you see it, no money back. And that's it, guys. So this is Jaiz. This is done. Again, a lot of these deals, try to figure out how would you work out these deals when it comes to like a shop. If you go to a coffee shop, how would Ayub work over there? Right, so you go to a coffee shop, you're going to buy something, you find the coffee tastes too bitter, you find that there's a fly in the coffee, you find that the coffee cup is stained, you find that there's too much sugar in there, you find the wrong coffee was used, you find that the coffee is too cold. There's so many things that possibly can happen in a coffee shop where you have the right of returning the item. Okay. So again, all of these scenarios, once you understand them, how they work in a coffee shop, you can extend them to all places. Like if you go to a supermarket, how do they work in a supermarket? When you're going to buy a car, how would you work in a car, and so forth, right? So once you've understood the basic idea of how it works, the rest is quite easy. Okay, so some questions for you guys then. So let's say, for example, a person buys a watch off you. A person buys a slave. This only really kind of can be seen in a slave over here. Yeah, so a person buys a slave, or he buys a slave and frees the slave, or dies. The slave dies, and then later on finds out fault. Can he get a partial refund? Yes, he can. Okay, he gets a partial refund. Raja' bi nuqsani. Okay, if a person was to do the same but kill the slave, or bought food, or I don't know, bought some clothes, wore them out, and then threw them away, can he get a partial refund? So Abu Hanifa says no, because he's kind of like used the item for its purpose. And Sahibain, they say yes, he can, because this is considered to be still the right of the buyer. Okay, if a person buys an item, sells it onto someone else, and they sell to someone else, they sell to someone else, they sell to someone else, and then the last person finds a fault in there, what happens in the situation? So we say the person has the right to give it back, but if he goes through courts, then that guy can give it back to the first guy, and so forth. If he doesn't go through the courts and just does it out of court, then the guy before him can't take it back. He can't give it back to the first guy. Yeah. And what if a person wants to absolve themselves of all the faults in the item? Can he do that? We say yes. He doesn't have to mention what they are. And that's it, guys. So this was the whole lesson. This was last week's lesson, if you remember. Last week we talked about the finding a fault in the item. What can you do? You can either give it back or get a full refund, or keep it. You don't get any discount. You don't get any partial refund. What is considered to be a fault? So we said a fault is considered to be anything which reduces the value of an item in the markets. Anything that reduces the value in the markets. What is considered a fault in slaves? We talked about the urine and all that as well, and the bad odor. Okay. What about, for example, like if a fault occurs in the item after you purchased it, right? You've bought cloth and you've cut it. Then what? So we say technically you can get a partial refund, but if this seller is willing to accept it back and give you a full refund, that's also okay. But if you were to develop a fault inside of yourself, then the seller cannot take it back because some new mal has been added to it, and so that's considered to be wrong. And then today's lesson, what we done today. Right, so, and that's it, guys. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. Jazakallah khair for watching this video, guys. Let me know what you guys think of these videos. What part of these videos do you guys enjoy? What kind of things do you think I should continue doing so that it's more beneficial? I always like reading your comments, guys. And thank you to all my patrons, who are the ones basically who support my channel on a monthly basis, donate towards my channel so that I can use that money to be able to make videos, buy software, take out my own time so I can dedicate it to making videos for you guys. Thank you very much. Honestly, it means a lot to me. If any of you guys want to become patrons and you want to support my channel and think this is a worthy cause, then please check out the description below. You can even contact me as well. And that's it, guys. So Jazakumullah khair. I will see you guys next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.